Sex is everywhere you turn. In movies, adverts, TV, novels, the internet, on the streets, on billboards, you name it. However, there is one location we have left out: space. Does sex occur in space? If you've ever wondered about this topic, stay tuned as we try to answer the question of whether astronauts have sex in space. The record for the longest time spent in space at a stretch was set by Soviet cosmonaut Valery Polyakov. He spent 437 days on the ISS, during which time he orbited the Earth more than 7,000 times. When he returned to the Earth, he had to be carried out of the Soyuz capsule so as to readjust to the pull of gravity. However, something else was probably on his mind. As a normal adult, he might have been looking forward to intimacy. Astronauts, cosmonauts, and taikonauts forego a lot of things to be in space, but is sex one of those things? It is easy to only see astronauts as simply floating around doing lots of science experiments in space. However, they still remain humans even outside the planet. Sex and masturbation are linked to both physical and mental health, and this is true in space. In fact, ejaculation is necessary for men to avoid bacteria buildup in their prostate, and orgasms have been shown to relieve stress and anxiety as well as improve sleep quality, which is likely beneficial during a high-pressure space mission. So what does that intimate aspect of life look like when you're in space? First off, sex among astronauts is not something NASA wants to talk about. Apart from being a sensitive and personal thing, scientists and NASA personnel have long been skeptical of the psychological impact that sexual relationships could have on specific space missions. As a result, NASA and the International Space Station frequently avoid all questions about sex in space. But does that mean sex could never have happened between astronauts? As improbable as it may sound, NASA has actually sent a married couple to the ISS at the same time before. Lee and Davis became the first married couple to fly on the same mission aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour in September 1992, and also the last. In 1989, the couple met during training and were assigned to the STS-47 mission. Lee and Davis married in January 1991, but NASA was not informed until after the ceremony. Despite the fact that there was an unwritten policy not to put husbands and wives on the same flight, there wasn't enough time to train new astronauts for the Endeavour mission. As a result, the couple were able to take off together, but NASA promptly made that unwritten rule a formal policy. The couple got to have their honeymoon in space, and you know what most people do on their honeymoon, right? Whether the conditions on the ISS was enough to deter the newlyweds is not confirmed because both have refused to answer questions about the nature of their relationship during the mission. Ironically, Lee and Davis spent some time artificially inseminating frog eggs for, well, the greater good. At least one hoax has arisen in response to the question of space sex. According to French author Pierre Coller's book, The Last Mission, NASA commissioned a study on sexual positions in outer space. He cited a fictitious document widely available online in which subjects experimented with 10 different positions, 6 of which required an elastic band or a sleeping bag-like tube to keep the couple together in zero gravity. Astronauts planning to have sex will have to overcome some obstacles. To begin with, there isn't much privacy up there. A regular shuttle is roughly the size of a 737 with 2 main areas, the crew cabin and the middeck, each the size of a small office. There are no closed rooms where 2 people could retreat, and the bathroom is little more than a seat with a curtain. The space station, on the other hand, has slightly more operating space. For sleeping, the 3-person crew splits up. 2 sleep in a pair of tiny crew cabins at one end of the station, and the third may sleep in a sleeping bag at the other end, nearly 200 feet away. However, a spacebed's panel and strap design may not be conducive to lovemaking. Apart from the lack of privacy, astronauts also have a rigorous work schedule that leaves little time or energy for frivolity. But that does not mean space station crews do not get time off on weekends to watch movies, read books, play games, and generally have a good time. However, since space affects everything, you may wonder how it affects human libido. Can astronauts even sustain an erection? Early NASA research found that gravity shifts cause blood flow to change or reverse its course, moving upwards towards the head and chest rather than circulating in the lower half of your body. While NASA's research was not on sex in space, the finding implies that outer space may be an erection killer. The little publicly available information suggests that being in space reduces libido, at least initially. This is because microgravity, or the weightlessness astronauts experience in space, causes hormonal changes such as estrogen decreases, and a decrease in sex drive has been linked to lower estrogen levels. Unfortunately, the majority of what we know about hormones in space comes from male hormone tests. That's because only 11.5% of astronauts are female, and the few women who have gone to space have used birth control to avoid menstruation. This makes distinguishing between artificial and natural hormonal changes difficult. Another factor in cosmic sex drive is the change in the internal clock of astronauts. When you are going around the world, your circadian rhythms are altered, and that changes everything, including your sex hormones and probably your libido. The science also corresponds with astronaut Walter's on-site experience. He writes in his book that he had no libido during his brief 10-day stay in space. But there is hope. Astronaut sex drive, according to Walter, does readjust after a few weeks in space. However, some astronauts have weighed in to suggest otherwise. Interestingly, while NASA officially has shied away from the subject of sex in space, some astronauts have bared all. In a 2014 interview with Men's Health magazine, astronaut Michael Mullane stated that he had an erection that could have drilled through kryptonite on his space missions. Another astronaut named Ron Garan admitted on an Ask Me Anything Reddit thread that he knows of nothing that happens to the human body on Earth that can't happen in space when asked whether erections happened in outer space. Polyakov, the record holder, wrote in his diary that the Psychological Support Service sent them some nice, colorful movies that helped them regain their will and act like normal adult males. There is nothing to be ashamed of, according to the cosmonaut. Polyakov also claimed that his superiors encouraged him to bring an inflatable sex doll with him on his 14-month stay aboard the Mir space station. He did, however, express his strong opposition to such a solution. A person who uses such items may develop doll syndrome or begin preferring the doll to their own spouse or loved one even after they return to Earth. Another cosmonaut named Alexander Levakin discussed the subject in the book Packing for Mars. He said, "Everyone is doing it and everyone understands. It's insignificant. How do you make sex in space, my friends ask? By hand, I say." Levakin stated that there are possibilities and also implied that he ejaculated in his sleep on occasion. According to an anonymous physician who has worked with NASA, astronauts can easily touch themselves due to a short-sleeve dress code aboard the spacecraft. Furthermore, because most astronauts admit to being able to control the cameras aboard the spacecraft, it would be relatively easy for them to secretly rub one out while taking a shower or huddled in their phone booth-sized sleeping quarters. Some imaginative people have even speculated that even in environments like space shuttles, where there is rarely any closed-door privacy, astronauts could simply look the other way while a colleague does their business. This appears to be common in army quarters. But how about physical intimacy between two astronauts in space? One thing that is sure is that sex in space is bound to be far more exhausting than it is on Earth. Newton's third law, which states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, makes thrusting against each other a real challenge in zero gravity. You might not realize it, but gravity helps in the act of intercourse. There is pressure on sex. Without any counterforce in space, you end up constantly pushing your partner away from you. However, where there is a will, there is a way, or so the saying goes. A pair of astronauts determined to have sex could use a method used by dolphins in the ocean, in which a third party holds the other two together to prevent them from drifting. But that doesn't sound great, does it? Most people prefer to be in a secluded place when satisfying their sexual urges. But there is another idea that is literally off the wall. Because the walls of the space station are completely covered in Velcro, astronauts could take advantage of this by Velcroing one partner to the wall. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Meanwhile, what about reproduction? You know, the stage that sometimes results after humans engage in sex. How does it work out in space? The fact is that we can't avoid the issue forever, especially if we had become multiplanetary, as Elon Musk wishes. According to experts, whether and how reproduction works is just one of many medical and biological questions related to long-duration space travel that require better answers and more diverse data. Right now, anyone who wants to send a human to Mars for a minimum of nearly 2 years is in many ways flying blind. Space reproduction research has been slow and underfunded. Over the course of 50 years, it has happened in fits and starts. At least 5 different species, ranging from amoebas to rats, have been observed reproducing in space. Other species have either spent a portion of their gestation in space or donated space-altered sperm and eggs to science. Sadly, the information gleaned from this study is not entirely reassuring. Space travel, it seems, can have an impact on reproduction in a number of ways. The first and most obvious is radiation. Space is filled with subatomic particles that move at breakneck speed. Those particles have the ability to slam into DNA like a bowling ball laying down a nice split. The damage they cause can alter genetic instructions, paving the way for cancer, genetic mutations that can be passed down to children, and other issues. Our planet's atmosphere and magnetic field shield us from more than 99% of this radiation. In orbit, the magnetic field also provides some protection. However, the further you are from Earth, the less shielding you have. Complicating things is that of the list of organs sensitive to radiation damage, the gonads, ovaries, and testes are always in the top 2 or 3. Yet any trip to Mars would result in radiation exposures exceeding the currently allowed limits for astronauts. The second threat to reproduction in space is microgravity, as it appears to alter biology as well. Astronauts are well known for losing muscle mass while in space. When you don't have to bear your own weight every day, your body weakens. However, the effects of microgravity are stranger and more complex than what a modified treadmill can address. Some female mice who traveled to the space station in 2010 and 2011 stopped ovulating, while others lost their corpus luteum, an important structure that forms in the ovary after an egg is released. The corpus luteum is what produces hormones that keep a pregnancy going until the placenta can grow large enough to do the job itself. Pregnancy might occur without it, but it's unlikely to last. Microgravity has also been linked to altered sperm production and behavior. It has the potential to affect fetal development, particularly the vestibular system, which aids in balance when walking. Also, rats who go into labor soon after returning from space have nearly twice the number of contractions as rats who never leave Earth. Whether these conditions will affect humans too is yet to be proven. We are yet to fully understand the effect of gravity on the human body.